In Washington, D.C., preparations are set for Cuba to open an embassy in the U.S. for the first time in more than 50 years. After the United States removed the Caribbean island from the controversial state-sponsored of terrorism list, the two countries announced they would open embassies on July 20. The move has been welcomed across the hemisphere, although Cuban officials and others maintain that the U.S. must end its economic blockade in order for the countries to have normal relations.
We're opening embassies. We're going to have now a normal dialogue between one another, but the embargo is still in place, and we won't have normal relations so long as it is. And the Cubans are insisting that we lift the embargo. So it's going to be difficult. It's going to be a very difficult process to remove the embargo because we have to go through the Congress.
Pope Francis greeted pilgrims in St. Peter's Square Sunday, where he spoke about his recent visit to South America. The pontiff, who told worshippers that the continent still faces social and economic problems, addressed during his visit to Ecuador, Bolivia, and Paraguay. Pope Francis once again stirred controversy by speaking about inequality and criticizing economic systems and policies that create poverty and environmental degradation.
The Latin American continent has great human and spiritual potential, holds deeply rooted Christian values, but also faces serious social and economic problems. To contribute to their solution, the Church is committed to mobilize the spiritual and moral strength of its communities, working with all components of society.
Social and political organization Marcha Patriótica has strongly condemned the arrest of one of its rural leaders, something they consider a retaliation for his defense of human rights, as well as his role in a nationwide campesino strike back in 2013.
We social organizations have the legitimate right to protest. We believe that the government is trying once again what it has been a continuous state policy in Colombia, which is to set up a situation in order to stigmatize communities and present the result that does not exist in reality.
In what has been labeled as judicial false positives, last week President Santos presented 13 arrested social activists as responsible for 2 recent bomb attacks, but later the charges ended up being related to a student protest. Now, as social organizations were denouncing the latest arrest, they received the news that a second leader was being arrested right in that moment.
There's a full offensive against social movements in Colombia. The government has the wrong idea that by weakening the social movements, it's going to accelerate the negotiations with the FARC, as well as establish negotiations with the ELN guerrillas. Basically, because there is a social movement that has been demanding from the government the bilateral ceasefire, and it is the social movements that have demanded a peace with deep transformations.
For Hector, a resident and leader of the war-torn Cauca state, the de-escalation of the conflict that the president has lately committed to necessarily implies that he also gives guarantees to social and rural movements.
What the government is doing is counterproductive. On the one side, opening up the possibility for a bilateral ceasefire, but on the other, putting chains and silencing the country's social movements, which for years, centuries, have been demanding real equality and real social justice. We have been struggling for a different Colombia.
Within the ongoing peace process, one of the points that have already been agreed to is the guarantees of political participation. Now, what social movements are demanding from the government is that it acts on its talk of peace in Havana and stop criminalizing social protest in Colombia. NATALIA MARGARITA, teleSUR, Bogotá.
Dozens of members of the white supremacist Ku Klux Klan group rallied in front of the South Carolina State House to protest the removal of the Confederate flag from the State House last week. A counter-rally by the Black Educators for Justice, along with hundreds of others, confronted the extremist Ku Klux Klan gathering as a heavy police presence watched over.
You're a disgrace! This is my fucking state!
2 men who were involved in the scuffle were arrested. North Koreans went to the polls Sunday in the country's local elections for deputies to the provincial and city local assemblies, the first since Kim Jong-un came to power in 2011. State news agency KHAMENEI released footage of voting and events during the elections, which are held every 4 years. Voters have option to ratify or reject the single nomination for each position. By 2 p.m. local time, media reported voter turnout at 91%. With over 1 billion Muslims celebrating Eid al-Fitr Friday and Saturday, Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Khamenei delivered prayer services to thousands gathered in Tehran. At the ritual that took place at Tehran's Grand Prayer Grounds, Khamenei reiterated that Iran is not seeking to build nuclear weapons. The leader emphasized Iran's policy towards the American government, adding that the Islamic Republic of Iran will continue to support the oppressed people in Palestine and Yemen, as well as the government of Syria and Iraq. The head of Bolivia's Soccer Federation was arrested on corruption charges this Friday, Bolivia's public prosecutor said. Chavez, who is also the treasurer of the South American Football Confederation, is accused of a scam involving a fund set up for the family of a fan who died at a 2013 match in the central Bolivian city of Oruro. According to local reporters, the fund's family never received any money from the fund. The soccer chief denied the charges.
Facts that have marked the course of history. Productions designed in the English language and made for the English-speaking world. This is Documentary. Watch it on telesur.net/English. telesur, wherever the news, you'll be there.